this evening. Mr. McClelland is caught in traffic, so he will be here as soon as he can make his way from downtown to New Albany. So with that being said, could I please call the meeting to order and request a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Newmoff is absent. Ms. Kalinowski? Here. Mr. Darrow?
Here.
Vice President McClellan is coming but absent. President Kohler?
I'm here as well. So would everyone please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well, our first order of business this evening is to approve the minutes of the July 13th work session and June 13th work session and the June 27th regular meeting of the Board of Education. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow. In a second.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any additions or changes to the minutes? As always, the board has had the opportunity to review the minutes in advance. So hearing no updates, corrections, or additions, I'd like to request a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski?
Yes.
President Kohler?
Yes, and that motion carries. That brings us to communication to the board. Oh, and first of all, I guess we need to also do additions to the agenda. This is a new format for our meeting here. So are we going to do two actions in one here? Or are we going to?
I actually think it's just a typographical mistake.
All right, so
Communication
we're
to the
gonna-
board should be separate as a
Separate?
line.
Okay, so let's go ahead then and entertain, well, first I guess I should ask if there are any additions to the agenda this evening.
President Kohler, members of the Board of Education, on page 4 of your agenda, there's one additional supplemental contract that was omitted through typographical error. So it's been inserted into the public copy and your copy. But that is the one difference between the agenda that was released on Friday to you and the one that's presented to you this evening for approval.
Thank you very much. So could I then entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended by the superintendent?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. And could we take a vote on that, please?
Ms. Kalinowski?
Yes.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
President Kohler?
Yes, and that motion carries. And that then brings us to the superintendent's communication to the board.
Thank you,
Mr.
President
Sawyers.
Kohler, members of the Board of Education. This evening, we're going to begin with a update for the 100-plus day plan for entry to the superintendency effective August 1st for the school district. So you have within your packets the 100-day plan update that I'm doing this evening. But to recall, for public purposes, for those watching at home or in our audience this afternoon, or actually this evening, the Board of Education charged me as part of the entry plan to become the next superintendent of the school district with a 100-day plan. The updates this evening I share with you basically illustrate the last 10 work days since our last Board of Education meeting. So I have continued to take a few vacation days off this month in preparation for the transition on August 1st to become the next superintendent within the school district. I've continued to have a wide variety of meetings throughout the school campus and or with district stakeholders or community stakeholders. And most recently, as of last week, and she's sitting here this evening because I asked her to attend tonight's board meeting to meet all of you, if she has not yet met you, is my new administrative assistant to the superintendent, Becky Schell. So she is so when you call the office, if you don't call my cell directly, you will get Becky. So we now have two Beckys in the office, and it's been very interesting since the other Becky got back from Cuba. So we're trying to navigate through the Beckys, but it's been fun. Board discussions and staffing conversations continue in preparation for 2016-17. I'm happy to report on the certified side of the staff After tonight's board actions, we will be fully staffed on the certificated license side, meaning all administrators and teachers in the school district have been hired for 2016-2017. And Mrs. Honecker is actively trying to finalize finding 2 more bus drivers in preparation for 16-17 as well. The custodial vacancy that I have on the PowerPoint when I did this on Friday has actually been filled. So we now have filled the custodial staff member. So presently, I know we have 2 bus driver candidates and we posted for 2 additional cafeteria aides. So we are in the home stretch of being fully staffed for 2016-2017. Several staff members and I met with Rotary this past week to continue conversations about the Golden Egg Drop that's scheduled as a fundraiser for Pay to Participate athletic scholarships in the month of October. The Rotary will be rolling out additional information later this week into next week related to the fundraiser. They're crossing their T's and dotting their I's with what it's going to basically represent. But it's a huge opportunity to raise scholarship money for the school district to help offset Pay to Participate fees for our students and their families through scholarships. Dr. Troyer and I have continued our planning for 2016-17 as we make this transition to new leadership within the school district. We spent several hours this afternoon meeting with the curriculum division that I'm restoring through restructuring of positions within the school district. So we had very productive conversations with Mr. Emery and Dr. Hamilton. Dr. Hamilton will arrive later this week to officially become part of the school campus. So we're excited to welcome her to her new role, and also Mr. Emery as he transitions to his new position to support K through 12 curriculum assessment and instruction, dominantly grades K through 5 as the elementary director. We've also continued to have conversations with the New Albany Community Foundation, the Heights Center, and the community in the school district. Dr. Troyer and I have been leading conversations with them related to mental health or behavioral health opportunities for education opportunities for students and families for 2016-17. We have another meeting with the foundation next week with district stakeholders to talk about the partnerships specifically. PLE and OPSI relationships continue to develop as we transition for the leadership. We've gone through the preliminary local report card data analysis and done some resubmissions last week based upon changes that actually were submitted to the department that we actually got to see. We did find a student error related to student data, and there's a window of opportunity with the State Department that you actually can resubmit for correction. So we did have the good fortune to do that last week as well. The Hanover Research Project continues. I've talked about that previously. I should have information late this week, if not early next, from Hanover specifically. As soon as I get the preliminary information I've requested through the data analysis that we're doing for the school district, I'll be sure to provide that to the Board of Education. I don't yet have it, but it is. The McCoy board met last Thursday for the directors meeting. I did attend and had a conversation with several board of director members related to the education planning for 2016-17. Dr. Troyer and I participated in a conference call this morning with Jill Beckett-Hill to coordinate a stakeholder meeting specifically related to the arts education. Presently, there's approximately $45,000 in grant funding that will be provided to the school district through the Arts Foundation through the McCoy board. District personnel and I continue to meet with police, fire, and Becky and I actually worked this afternoon to update with Jill Hatton the next version of the emergency operation plans in preparation for a meeting with police and fire on August 3rd. So we will have the emergency operation plans ready to go for the start of the new school year. And building principals and I will be meeting with police and fire the first week of August to go through those in detail about the changes that have been made for 2016-17 so that we are prepared to talk directly to teachers and staff members about them as we roll them out for the 2016-17 school year. Dr. Troyer and I participated in the first webcast from the State Department of Education related to the changes in the 2016-17 report card. The biggest feature that's coming out this fall in September upon release, there's 6 new letter grades and individual components that'll be added for the 2014-15-16 school year to be reported in September of 16. So there's 6 new letter grades within components that basically were highlighted through the webcast. The department did audio tape the webcast. It's posted on their website. So if you want to learn more specifically about the individual elements of the report card, it's about a 45-minute presentation. There's about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end that I would tell you to skip. But if you want the large group overview of what the components of the report card indicate before we present them publicly in September, the webcast is now posted. I can send you that information if you're interested in receiving it. I got the link. Dublin City Schools was here last Thursday for a tour of the K-12 learning facility. So we continue to receive inquiries from school districts that are considering innovative building projects. Ours, after it was highlighted in several construction magazines and educational platforms throughout the nation, we have gotten additional inquiry to the school district. We are selective based upon what they're in search of. So we do some questioning on the telephone before we accept every tour of the learning facility. Several of them just want information related to furniture. You don't need to take a tour to see the pictures on the website and then obtain that information. But if there's an educational purpose, much like Dublin last Thursday, we do try to accommodate that and provide the opportunity for them to come and actually tour the school district and actually see the facility. The leadership team retreat planning continues. Dr. Troy and I met this morning based upon the work that I've done in the last 2 weeks. For the retreat, the administrative retreat is August 1st and 2nd here in the school district. There's a very full agenda that I'm in the process of finalizing. I will provide that to the board for your information as soon as I finish it, most likely by Friday this week, given the fact that it's next Monday and Tuesday. 2016-17 arts discussion I've talked about. Transportation routes, Mrs. Honecker, Ms. Jenkins and I have met to review all the transportation route information based upon the discussion with the board at your last meeting. Routes for 2016-17 are being presented to you this evening for approval. And based upon the action that you elect to take, we will then finalize routes in order to prepare them for communication to district families. So there will be a letter that ultimately goes out electronically to all district families, providing them with their bus transportation information for 2016-17 based upon the action that you elect this evening. And with that, I'm going to conclude my update and see if there's any questions from the board.
Only question is, when do you anticipate your last report on your 100-day plan?
Well, considering it goes to December,
That's more than 100 days.
it is more than 100 days. So it's the different phases. The next phase that begins on August 1st is entry. And there's plus or minus 45 days of specific activities that are incorporated into that. It's one of my questions actually to discuss during the retreat based upon when the transition actually began and when I officially take office as the next superintendent, which is technically Monday, August 1st. So we've been well ahead of our 100-day plan, given the work that I've been doing since April 12th.
Hence the reason for the question, because I know you're ahead of schedule,
I am.
as expected.
Thank you. I appreciate you recognizing that. So I've been working diligently, as with my staff members. So we've got a great team, and we are forging ahead. We're making great progress, and I'm really excited that we're staffed. Almost. Linda, 2 more bus drivers. So cafeteria aides, got all kinds of applications for. So Linda's just got to get me 2 more bus drivers, and then we'll be set. So we're really excited the new school year is about to begin.
Congratulations on the staffing. It's more than your staff. You have an excellent team. So I'm excited.
It's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's actually been a lot of fun. At the same time, I don't know that everybody would interpret that all the time for the hours, but it's been time well invested because I truly believe we've found some exceptional persons to join our leadership team and to join the school district at large with the excellent staff that we have. So we're confident that it's going to be a great school year.
Great job.
Thank you.
That's terrific. And that brings us to our updates from PLE and OPSI. I know that we have someone from PLE here this evening.
Salisa.
Yes. How are you, Ms. Finley?
Great.
Good. I'm doing well as well.
Okay, so we know July is no exception for teaching and professional development, I should say learning and teaching, with the goal of positively impacting student achievement. So on the lovely lavender sheet that you have, we just have some updates that have been shared by staff. I'll do my best to summarize without reading it. But we have third grade teacher Stephanie Brewster toured 12 energy sites around Ohio through the Ohio Energy Project, and she plans to share her firsthand experience with her students, as well as the 100 pictures that she took. We have 7 members of the high school humanities department that worked on curriculum innovations and alignment for the freshman humanities course. And they also plan to implement some of Kate Toma's design thinking and fundamentals of innovation. Dana K. Grice, who's a middle school art teacher, took 4 day-long workshops, and she's going to incorporate the mini ceramic techniques that she learned into her classroom for her students, and she'll also incorporate those into the Empty Bowls experience for the community later on this year. And Dana, further down, you'll see that she also completed 2 graduate courses in collaboration and assessment for gifted learners. Amy Smith attended Spanish for Educators. She's also wrote and practiced speaking a phone script that she might need for parents. And she also designed an invitation for parent-teacher conferences and a report card summary that could be sent home for parents, which is great. And then Elliot Limberg, high school drama teacher, attended a 2-day workshop at Kenyon College, and he's collaborating and transforming the Department of Dance, Drama, and Film's semester-long course. This is the turning it into a year-long course, and this will be offered for the first time at the high school and will enable students to earn dual credit through the College Credit Plus program. And then finally, we have Lindsay Harrington, K-1 art teacher, who completed 2 courses, and both courses will give her invaluable information and techniques to impact the K-1 art students.
Thank you very much. It's always good to hear that our teachers are lifelong and constant learners, which is exactly what we hope our students are as well. So thank you for sharing. Is there anyone here from OPSI this evening?
There's not.
No? Okay. Well, then that brings us to the discussion items. And the first one is, I'm wondering if there are any board liaison reports this evening.
I could just mention that the PTOs are continuing to work on, with the communications team, on the look and feel of the one PTO website, and then developing the links that go to each specific PTO group. And they're looking for other opportunities for synergies across the PTOs. So I'll probably have a lot more detail to share once we get closer to the start of school. But they're excited. I feel like they're working more collaboratively across the PTOs than they ever have before. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity.
Great.
Yeah.
That's super. Yeah, that's a big change for
Yes.
the coming year. And it's wonderful to hear about the collegiality that group is beginning to foster. So that will only benefit the students and the staff as well. So the other thing that I just wanted to mention is to thank Mrs. Kalinowski, who has been working with Mr. Sawyers and on a opportunity for parents and staff and the little ones who live in those homes to come together to meet all of the new leaders who have joined the district over the past few months. And so we're looking forward to hosting everyone on August the 8th from 6 to 7:30 at night. And we are going to be having this special opportunity that will be very informal, and we'll be providing a little treat for people, a little snack, and it will be held in the middle school cafeteria. So there will be more information coming, but we want to make sure that families out there understand that this is indeed something that you can do together, and we are very excited about giving you an opportunity to meet all these wonderful new people who we keep talking about. So there's that. And we have some policies that some we have been working on, and one that is new this evening for our discussion. So, Mr. Swords.
Thank you, President Kohler. You have 3 policies on the agenda this evening. I will speak to the first one specifically. So transportation is being presented this evening both for discussion, review, and action on the agenda. Based upon the conversations at the last meeting, there's been a minor modification for permissive language related to the exceptions. In that, I added or is otherwise approved by the Board of Education. So it gives the board the ability, based upon route approval, if there's going to be any exception to the rules that are in place related to the 2-mile walking distance for students in grades K through 12, it can happen through the actual approval of bus routes on an annual permissive basis. So there's an additional clarification added to the last sentence of the 3rd paragraph to make it permissive to transport on approval by the board.
And this is considered a second reading of this policy?
Actually, a second reading is not required. You can actually have 1 reading of board policy pursuant to Ohio Revised Code and have it as an action item on the same agenda. So given the simplistic addition that's being added this evening for clarification purposes, I'm not recommending that it goes through first reading and a second reading because you don't have an August work session. So it would wait till the end of August after the school year actually would begin. So I'm expediting it for action at the same agenda because this is the only board meeting you have unless we schedule a special meeting prior to the start of the new school year. Because the retreat is technically, yes, it's a Board of Education meeting, but it's a special meeting. It's not scheduled as a work session.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from board members about the slight change to the transportation policy? Okay.
The second policy this evening is 7250 for naming of district property. This has been presented previously to the Board of Education, and the first time was in October of 2013. And it's actually been presented twice historically for discussion amongst Board of Education members to talk about the naming rights of district property. This is being presented this evening strictly for discussion purposes. So the policy itself, I'm really not even recommending first reading on. I'm just resurrecting the topic for discussion amongst the Board of Education. As the board knows, we did receive the Straight A grant specifically for the Solar House project. We've actually received an inquiry from the Solar House Committee that's working on that project about board policy specifically to the naming rights. They're out from a philanthropic standpoint trying to raise additional dollars. So the questions come from the Solar Committee. What threshold amounts, if any, does the Board of Education desire related to the naming rights of district property? So there is a corporation that they are pursuing, as an example, that they would like to become a major donor or sponsor of the actual Solar House building. And one of the questions that's been asked is there a specific threshold that has to be met that then would generate the ability for this corporation to have their logo or their name attached to the Solar House physically. So we have discussed this previously within the school district. Again, back to 2013 is the first time that I'm aware of it when I was in the school district. Dr. Dominique did bring it forward. This is a generic model policy that's been amended from Neola to meet district needs. But we really are bringing it forward to find out what is the current will of the Board of Education. What interest, if any, do you have? I've tried to present you the additional background information that Ms. Jenkins and I had worked on with Dr. Dominique to research other school districts, both public, private, and higher ed, about naming rights or endowment funds that may exist within their organizations and what that could or could not mean for our school district specifically. So before we invest any additional time or energy into the topic, we want to know if the Board of Education has an interest in bringing this forward for discussion at this time because it was not of interest previously.
Worth discussing.
Would we be looking at it probably as something that could be applied more broadly than the solar house.
Yes. I'm just using the solar house as a specific example because it's currently the one that's being asked about in our current situation. But yes, I mean, there has been conversation even back to October 13 when this was first presented. There was discussion at the time. We were trying to think about alternative funding sources to the school district that could fund capital account or to ultimately generate additional revenue beyond the reliance on property tax owners. If there would be private or corporate donations received, could you name a specific building as an example? And there was discussion at the time back in 2013 that Mrs. Kohler probably will recall well, where there was a discussion about the individual buildings at the high school. Instead of being A, B, C, D in letters, could it be X Hall, and it's named after a specific individual or a specific corporation, and that would appear as an example on student schedules, much like a higher education institution, that their schedule would reflect the building that would then be named after a specific entity or individual, corporation or individual, that would then provide philanthropic support to the school district based upon specific thresholds established by the board. Does that sound familiar to you?
It sounds very familiar to me. And interestingly enough, I think that I was kind of the foot dragger on this particular policy. Philosophically, I would prefer not to get into naming rights or corporate naming or any of those things on what I consider to be public buildings. However, the times they are changing, and we're in a different place now in 2016 than we were even in 2013. And I am certainly willing to give my endorsement to the to your recommendation to bring this back up for further discussion. I think that, you know, I appreciate the work that you've already done to explore best practices in other places. I think that there's probably more discussion that needs to take place so that we avoid any of the pitfalls that might occur by naming a building after someone who turns out not to be as wonderful as they thought we were, and that kind of a thing. But yes, I think the time has come to revisit it, and I would be happy to work with you on that.
You know, I was trying to think culturally in New Albany, do we already have a precedent a little bit of some of this? And I think about, you know, like the Charlotte Kessler Library or the Phil Height Center. So I don't think it's would be totally out of the norm for New Albany. So I'd be open to discussing it.
Well, to that end, and I think it's a good example, beyond New Albany and the greater proper of ultimately the city, there's actually examples on the school campus. So it's the Jeannie B. McCoy Performing Arts Center. It's Mershad Hall inside the Jeannie B. McCoy Performing Arts Center. There's the Abercrombie and Fitch Education Wing within the Jeannie B. McCoy Performing Arts Center. So the precedent was set on campus, and it's a little bit different because it's not just the school district. Although it's on property, the McCoys jointly owned between the city, the township, and the school district. So there is the precedent that school district as a partner at the McCoy with the city and with the township did have that opportunity for naming rights when the facility was actually built and the specific wings or classrooms, or in this case, the black box from Mershad Hall, were put in place. So it's in existence, but it's exclusively on campus at the McCoy.
Oh, sorry.
Please, go ahead.
What restrictions, if any, could or would be placed on funds that are given for naming rights of buildings? Or, I mean, is that money just going into the revenue fund, or is it going into some sort of an endowment? Is it going to fund specific, would it be going to fund specific academic programs? What flexibility is there for the use of those funds?
I believe any of those are possible. There's no predetermined outcome. That's why we're presenting it, to find out what interest is there before we expend any energy in trying to actually determine what options could be presented. I believe there's resources and experts that live within our community that have experience with endowment funds or naming rights at other institutions, even beyond the, I think, 12 examples I gave you, that we had done research specifically on through private, public, and or higher education institutions as examples. So I think there's a lot more work that can be done to give you options to then decide what do you want to put into policy related to how that fund would actually be established and for what purposes it would be used, capital endowment, scholarship, or otherwise, educational programming. So I think all those things are possible. We just haven't expended any energy to do that work beyond the initial information provided. Fair?
Just taking a quick review of the list of examples, I didn't see any that were other public primary schools. Is that because there aren't any?
We've tried to search through the educational institutions that we have connections to in Ohio to try to find specific examples, and I have not been successful beyond initial scholarship funds that are generally established for pay to participate in the examples I found. I haven't found any that go to specific naming rights for an endowment or capital expenditure within a school district. I'm not going to say they don't exist, I just have not found them yet.
I think it's a great idea. I think we should pursue it. I think it's another example of this community being a leader in a number of ways. And I guess the only thing, maybe to your point, is for all of the benefits that this could provide us, it's not going to outweigh the significant investment that the taxpayers put in this community on a yearly basis. So, I mean, we should probably make that clear going forward, but I think it's definitely something that is worth looking into and could be a great value add for our school district.
Yeah, I think you've got pretty clear direction that there is indeed interest. And so, you know, I think we would ask that you continue to work on this. And
So Ms. Jenkins and I will add this to the to-do list. In the interim of that, as board members, if you know of any community members that in your conversations that either have approached you personally and or will approach you based upon this conversation that have an interest or experience in this specific topic, Ms. Jenkins and I would welcome the opportunity to speak with them. Because if there are resources available within our community that have done this, or have experience with it both in the private or corporate environment, we could probably learn something from them that could be applicable to us. The last policy this evening is 3223 for school counselor evaluations, and I'm going to ask Dr. Troyer to speak to this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyers and President Kohler. At your places, you have a document labeled Standards-Based Counselor Evaluation. I distributed it this evening. In your packets, there also was a version that is a template that we received from Neola, the organization that provides policy templates for our consideration. So I'd like to use the version that I handed out this evening because it is more developed and refined than the sample template that was provided to us. So essentially, Ohio Revised Code requires that all local boards of education adopt a standards-based school counselor evaluation policy by September 30th of this year. So that's our time frame. We do not need to implement it this year based on when our master contract expires and will be renegotiated. So we anticipate that we have this year to, first of all, adopt the policy, and then to work with our counselors to train our principals who will be evaluating them, and then be prepared for full implementation the following year. Those of you who have been here for a while will recognize as we move through this draft policy that it's very similar to the one developed for teachers that we adopted a couple of years ago. So as we look at the policy, a lot of the initial pieces are definitional. As you go on to page 3 of the 8 pages, you'll see that school counselors will get the same ratings that teachers do. They can be rated either as accomplished, skilled, developing, or ineffective. So in many ways, this mirrors the teacher evaluation framework. On the next page, you can see the 6 standards that will be used for the assessment of school counselor performance. And just like they did with the teacher standards, a rubric has been developed that will be used by principals as they evaluate counselors on these 6 standards. The actual evaluation format, again, is modeled after the teacher evaluation system with both formal and informal observations, at least 2 formal ones of at least 30 minutes each every school year, and also informal ones. There are provisions for school counselors who receive accomplished or skilled ratings to be evaluated less frequently than every year. Again, the same pattern as we have for teachers. The timeline on page 5 is the same as for teachers. Evaluations will be completed by May 1st. Report of the results will be provided to the counselor by May 10th, and then June 1st is the deadline for notice of renewal or non-renewal. Probably one place that is different than the teacher policy is under formal observation procedure on page 5 there in the middle of the page. There are times when school counselors are engaged in counseling activities with students that require confidentiality, and so observations would not occur during those types of sessions. And the same with the informal observations or walkthroughs. Going on to the next page, the school counselor evaluation framework also includes a component related to performance metrics. With teachers, of course, this is academic growth. And so it's fairly straightforward, although the implementation can be complicated. But for counselors, we're going to need to develop and bring to you for consideration performance metrics that can be used for counselors. So they will be in the areas of academics, career planning, and social emotional development. And as you can see, some of those metrics may be a little more complicated or challenging to develop than just the simple, straightforward academic growth ones. So that is one thing that we could work on during the coming school year in preparation for implementation the following year. Just as with teachers, school counselors will develop a professional growth plan every year. If they are rated as developing or ineffective, they would create a professional improvement plan, which has different requirements for it. And then as required in the provision in Ohio Revised Code, retention and promotion decisions and removal of poorly performing school counselors would incorporate the results of these evaluations. So the framework is very similar to that for teachers. It actually happened at the state level because counselors wanted to have a similar evaluation framework. They saw what had been done for teachers and wanted something similar for themselves. And so the state worked with groups of counselors to develop the framework that ended up being adopted by the General Assembly. So at this point, I would entertain any questions that you might have. Just a final recap on timeline. We would do a second reading at next month's meeting in August and potentially adopt the policy then, or if necessary, we could hold it over until the September regular board meeting, and that would be our final deadline so that we can meet the September 30th requirement in revised code. And then we would work to develop implementation practices this school year, maybe pilot it one semester, and then do full implementation next school year.
Just reading through it, not really knowing exactly how I would otherwise evaluate a school counselor. I struggle with the what seems like a relatively small number of expected evaluation periods for the counselor. So on the second page, formal and informal observations. School counselors shall be evaluated based on at least 2 formal observations of at least 30 minutes each. And I look at it as a blank informal observations each school year. So my question is, how many? You know, what is reasonable to expect? Similarly, with making noise on the microphone, I struggle with the idea that even someone who is ranked skilled would not have an expectation to have regular reviews and regular interactions with a supervisor or manager or coach of some sort, have some sort of formal feedback process. And to skip that for a year because they're skilled doesn't strike me as being particularly effective management. And it could just be that I'm not familiar with exactly how the management would work otherwise.
In response to your comments, I'd have a couple of things to share. First, in regard to the frequency of the observations, at least 2 formal observations, which actually the observation encompasses a pre-observation conference meeting, the actual observation itself, and then a post-conference debrief, along with written feedback and ratings on the rubric. 30 minutes is a minimum. For teachers, we found that we generally go an entire class period, which is more like 45, 47 minutes. But these are minimums that are established. The informal observations with teachers, we do at least 2 each year, but if a teacher or if a principal or an evaluator sees that there are concerns or issues, then a 3rd formal observation is added, plus additional informal ones. So I think what this policy provides is a baseline below which we won't go, but the practice has been for teachers, and I anticipate it would be the same for school counselors, that it actually goes beyond that. With regard to the years that they are evaluated in terms of accomplished and skilled ratings, I failed to point out that in the what we call the off year, they still get at least 1 observation and 1 conference. So it's not the full-blown rubric-driven, multiple observations, multiple meetings, but it is still at least 1. And at any time that there are performance concerns or questions, we are free to go beyond that with any of our staff. And so we have exercised that right with teachers and would do that with counselors as well. So I would view this as a minimum below which we would not go, but that the actual practice ends up being somewhat more than this most of the time.
Would there be an objection to codifying some of the responses that you just gave in order to assure that they are incorporated into it, or?
Right.
On page 5 of 8, for the specifically skilled reference, in the paragraph at the top in number 2, what Dr. Troyer just described as the last sentence, if the determination is made to evaluate every other year, the council will nevertheless be provided with at least 1 observation and conference in any year that such counselor is not formally evaluated. So there is language that's included related to your second question that is codified within the draft policy that's presented this evening.
But I think there would be the possibility of adding something to the effect that, if the evaluator, feels that additional observations are needed, deems it's necessary, that additional ones would be scheduled.
Because that is the practice within the school district, not only with the recommendation for the guidance counselors, because they're still technically a teacher under Ohio Revised Code. It is the practice with classroom teachers, that is what happens in practice. If there's any reason on behalf of the evaluator, in this case, it's the building principal that evaluates the guidance counselors, or the assistant principal, one of the 2 administrators at the building level are assigned to evaluate the counselor. That can happen. But it is possible, if you'd like further clarification, that's why it's presented, to get the input from the board. Tell us what you want.
If we modified this policy, would we, since they technically are still classified as teachers, would we have to go in and change board policy on the teacher evaluations?
You can. It's not a have to. We would say that they should be aligned. It would probably be a conversation that we would recommend bringing back forward. The statutory requirement is now making guidance counselors when the Ohio teacher evaluation system was implemented within the state, guidance counselors were not a requirement
exempted.
under OTAS. They were exempted. So now the statute and the department have come back to look at the exempted classifications and create a system specifically for them based upon standards for that profession. So guidance counselors, the work has now been done, which has now triggered it in statute to say you need a policy specifically for your guidance counselors. Thus, the September 30th deadline to implement or to adopt the policy. Then you have, in our case, because our contract expires during this school year, we don't have to implement this school year. We would be required to implement next.
Right.
So the work has to get done once we have the policy. And we have the time to do it, which is good. Are there any other suggestions beyond Mr. Darrow's that Dr. Troyer and I can discuss for incorporation?
The building principals, they do the evaluations, and would they also set the specific goals under each of the standards?
Done with your evaluator during the pre-conference in cooperation with this case, it's the guidance counselor, much like it's done with the classroom teacher.
And for each of these 6 standards, the rubric, which I'll make a note to share that with all of you, the rubric does flesh that out more. And it talks about what we're looking for at accomplished levels, at skilled levels, what it looks like. So there are more specifics within that framework.
And so, for example, if Mr. Sawyer's had an overarching goal related to the culture or mental health of students, you would talk to your principals and then they would embed that as a goal in the counselors.
Yes, and likely it'll fit under the professional characteristics within the rubric.
Right.
For a specific component. When you come back to looking at the 6 categories, there can be something at the district level that then gets translated to the building level and or to the specific individual if it's role specific. So in this case, the guidance counselor.
I would point out, too, in response to your comments, Mrs. Kalinowski, that accomplished and skilled counselors actually develop their own professional growth plan. They do it in consultation and discussion with their evaluator, but they are the ones who develop it. Those with the ratings of developing or ineffective are different, where the building administrator actually, it creates, approves, co-creates the professional improvement plan. So it's a little bit different depending on where their performance levels are.
I was just wondering, like, if there was something big that you wanted to tackle in the student population, how you would make that happen. So it would kind of trickle down.
It would. I think it would become a focus of the conversations in the pre-conference, the post-conference. They were looking for this during the observation type of thing. Because within the 6 standards, it really captures a very broad expanse of practice for counselors. But we could certainly identify those that we wanted to really focus on and highlight in a given year.
Thank you.
Is there something similar for school nurses or?
There is not yet at this point, but my guess is that the other groups, school psychologists, others will be following suit in the coming years, is my guess. But at this point, there's not.
Okay, thank you. I don't hear any other questions.
That concludes our discussion items for this evening.
Thank you very much. It is the public participation section of our meeting. Has anyone signed up to speak this evening? Oh, we have one speaker. It's Steve Brown. Oh. Mr. Brown, if you would give us your address, and then you'll have 5 minutes. And our treasurer will give you an indication if you're running out of time. Okay?
For the opportunity.
Thanks.
So Steve Brown, I reside at 387 Rocky Fork Drive, South in Gahanna. I work, however, at the New Albany Christian Child Care. which is housed in the New Albany First Church of the Nazarene. And so my request is for a consideration in regard to transportation, that in previous years prior to the restriction of the 2-mile restriction, that we were given, our kiddos were given transportation by bus to school. And if it would be a possibility, we would like to be considered, now that we are again in that 2-mile radius, that our 30 children that would be going to both the K1 building and 2-5 building would be considered as a part of that transportation. It's evenly split, 15 children going to the K1 building and 15 that would go to either the 2-5 or 2-8 buildings. And currently, we've been able to staff accordingly in this past year to transport the kids, and it's gone well with a little bit of trial and tribulation, but it has presented quite a few conflicts throughout. With the upcoming Board of Education, Department of Education, along with the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, in whom we're licensed, January 1st of 2017, our church vans will no longer be able to be utilized. So we are going to be obligated to purchase transportation on our own. And those, even on a used basis, are between $25,000 to $35,000. A 15-passenger style would be in that price range. If we would go with a large school bus, we also transport to Gahanna schools and also Johnstown schools. So the consideration, I guess, for a request would be that we were, in fact, I guess, grandfathered in prior to the restriction, and if it could also be considered moving forward, should that determination be changed in the upcoming code, that would be greatly appreciated. So,
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will tell you that the information that we've been presented so far does not indicate that we're going to be able to do that, but I'm going to ask Mr. Sawyers to take another look at it, and he has your contact information, and I will ask you to reach out to Mr. Brown and follow up with the conversation. Mhm. Okay, that brings us to the consent agenda, and let's see if we can deal with this in 2 sections this evening. We'll take the treasurer's item for action first, and then follow that up with the superintendent's actions as well. So I'd like to entertain a motion, please, for treasurer's items A1.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jenkins.
I sent an update out to the board over the weekend, so I don't have anything further to add for the financials. But I did want to mention to the board that we are one step closer to hopefully receiving some help in buying new buses through the Clean Diesel grant through the EPA. Mr. Newmoff actually is the person that let us know about the grant, and so Linda Honecker, the Director of Transportation, and I have worked through some, I've learned a lot, interesting information to apply for the grants. It was moved forward for additional consideration. I had to make some modifications and resubmit that. I did that last Friday, so hopefully we're one step closer and we'll get that. It is a 25% reimbursement for 5 buses over the next 2-year period, so about $106,000 of reimbursement. So we're hopeful, we're pretty excited about that. And it's a lot of work.
These are buses that we would have purchased anyway?
Correct.
Any difference in cost on the buses that we would have purchased anyway, or are these?
They're the same cost. We go through bidding at MEC, Metropolitan Education Council, actually for all those member school districts, goes and bids buses, and then we purchase some of those buses that are bid. So the cost of the bus would be the same, but we'd receive the 25% reimbursement.
Yeah, I think the question is, it's the same bus we would have bought otherwise, so it meets all the requirements. It's just this
We
grant.
select the bus. They're actually just giving us the money to offset the price.
Yeah, so this grant is an opportunity to offset some of that price.
We're reducing emissions, so, yeah.
Yeah, we've learned a lot about clean diesel and fuel emission requirements.
When do you anticipate getting the final word?
I don't know that. I'm hoping soon. They seem always in a hurry to receive the information.
Then it stops.
So we had to initially apply by, I think it was the end of April, and we just learned about a week or so ago that we were being considered to be recommended for a further review. And then I just received the email asking for some additional information and some modifications to the grant that we implemented. So hopefully soon.
And these are replacement buses? So what do we do with the retired buses?
We actually have to drill a 3-inch hole through the core of the engine because we're reducing emissions. Although we could use some of the other parts as replacement parts, but they have to be scrapped.
So we do strip the buses to take replacement parts off of them, and then when possible, they go to salvage. On a going rate for a stripped bus, we typically get $800 on a good day. Right, Mrs. Honaker?
Now having to drill a hole through the engine block, I don't know that we'll receive that. But they're very old buses, the ones that we've identified. But you won't see them driving around.
So that raises the original question. Had we not gotten, or if we would not have applied for this grant, what would we have done with those buses?
We would have scrapped them.
We would strip them to the best of our ability.
The same thing
And
would
then
have occurred.
salvage them just like we are right now.
Okay.
So there are people that will still go after the chassis or specific pieces and parts, but we do take as much off the bus as we can to put in reserve for spare parts on other buses. And then they do go to salvage.
And this process goes through, depends on when we receive the grant. I believe that hopefully it should be September, October, we'll know. And it goes through this October through December 31 of 2018. But we had already planned on purchasing these replacement buses. So this is not an increase to our budget. We already had that. It's just an offset. It's hopefully a refund of 25% of the cost.
The replacement buses are line items in the 5-year forecast that you've approved. So they are existing expenditures that are forecasted in the 5-year forecast.
So it's a little more than one free bus. That's
That is
great.
correct.
That's great.
We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, yeah.
We're trying to find creative solutions to new revenue streams. So we've learned a lot about the EPA and clean emissions and fuel that we never knew.
Franklin County is a hot county for EPA emissions, so for diesel.
Great.
It's
All
very
fits in
favorable.
with our alternative energy sources outlook, right? With the new house and everything else. Well, that's great. So I'd like to call for a roll call vote, please, on the treasurer's one item this evening.
Vice President McClellan?
Yes.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski?
Yes.
Kalinowski, President Kohler.
Yes, that motion carries. And that brings us to the personnel's items. And I'd like to take that all with one action, please. That would be items B1A through C9 this evening. And I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment. May I?
Can I get a second
Second
first?
Second.
Thank you. Now you can make your quick
Sorry,
comment.
got that in the wrong order. Just as per my usual, as it relates to the amounts for salary for the supplemental contracts and such, these are all, the vote is essentially perfunctory as the amounts are governed by contract, and it is what it is.
Is correct. So you have several personnel items tonight in the agenda for approval. And as typical for the start of the school year, you have fall athletic supplementals and the co-curricular or extracurricular activities beyond athletics that are also in the agenda. As Mr. Darrow indicated, based upon the teacher's experience and or the supplemental holder's experience within the specific job that's identified, there are specific steps available to them pursuant to the negotiated agreement with the Teachers Association. So yes, the terms and conditions are dictated by contract. Beyond those elements that are outlined, the other personnel items really, as I indicated previously, help us finish staffing for the 2016-17 school year, with the exception of a few classified vacancies that still remain. There are a few classified actions within the agenda this evening as well. You are actually accepting the resignation for retirement of Mary Ann Bethel. She will have completed 30 years in the school district as of December 31st. So she has notified us through Ms. Jenkins' office, because she works in fiscal, that she will be retiring to celebrate 30 years within the school district. So it's bittersweet for her, ultimately, but she has told us of her plan to retire, so she does appear this evening, although her retirement's not until December, to allow us to start the planning process for, quite honestly, how that position is going to be restructured. It will not be replaced in the same way. It will be restructured differently for the future. A few resignations this evening. Again, a couple hires for classified staff in preparation for 16-17, similar to what the certified section was specifically for the teachers or supplemental contracts. In general business items this evening, the transportation policy, a field trip for high school students for a trip to New York for concert band and wind ensemble. They're actually doing a clinic and performing in New York in February. You may recall that we recently approved a out-of-state field trip for the orchestra for a like opportunity. Handbooks appear this evening. Pursuant to board policy, annually you need to approve the elementary, middle, and high school student handbooks for 2016-17. We are officially out of the print business for handbooks at the high school and middle school level. They are now electronic and will be accessible to families as a cost savings opportunity to the school district. Those were sent to you electronically in advance of tonight's meeting. We understand they're very long in length, but as parents, for those of you that have children in the school district, I'm sure you will read it cover to cover, because you get to sign off that you have received it as a parent. Transportation routes are on here this evening pursuant to our conversation at the last Board of Education meeting. Mrs. Honaker, Ms. Jenkins, and I have been working feverishly to try to confirm, dominantly Mrs. Honaker, routes for 2016-17. Upon your approval this evening, we will restore transportation eligibility for students in grades K through 5 from their home to the school district. That's part of the assumptions that were built into the routes. I understand the additional request that was presented this evening, and we'll have to go back and look at that, but presently that is not incorporated. I will remind everyone, just so that I can say I said it when the phone starts ringing, this is a wonderful opportunity for our K through 5 families, but we have to remember that to do this, kindergarten through 3rd grade will be required on the majority of routes. I can't say all, but at least majority, to have 3 students per seat. It's physically not possible to do this without understanding there will be 3 kids and several seats in grades K through 3. We think that the benefit far outweighs the investment that's required by the school district. If you recall from our conversation last month, or earlier this month, excuse me, at the board meeting, we have to add 2 more routes to the middle school to accommodate the increase in numbers. It's actually 3, but we're doing 1 through restructuring of routes. Mrs. Honaker has worked diligently for numerous hours in restructuring the routes. I will go on record to tell you, because we reviewed them again this morning, there is not a bus route in this school district for 2016-17 that looks anything like it did last school year. Kids will be riding different buses. Kids will have new bus drivers, but kids will be transported safely to school. Bus stops have also changed. Part of the way to make this all work is students may have to, pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, walk up to 1/2 mile to their bus stop in order to actually receive transportation to the school district if eligible. The last condition related to the bus routes that you're approving this evening is that there are no middle school and high school changes. The 2-mile rule remains the same. It's physically not possible without adding many more routes to transport the number of middle school and high school students that are ineligible for transportation. But there is an inherent benefit, as I explained at the last board meeting, possible for students in grades K through 5. Parents will still have the opportunity to opt out. Mrs. Honaker and I have also received from phone calls since our meeting earlier this month where parents have already told us, I know you don't have the process in place yet, but I don't need the bus. So we already have people opting out, which will help us as we ultimately can see what we can do to balance routes. Mrs. Honaker and I are working on a communication with Ms. Jenkins to go home to families. Bus routes will be announced towards the end of the first week of August, ballpark, the first Friday in August or the following Monday. So somewhere between the 5th and the 8th, we will notify families in the school district of transportation routes for 2016-17. Beyond that, in the agenda, you have the donations. We're always grateful for the donations that are received by the school district. The Hemingway project is on tonight's agenda from the New Albany Community Foundation that I will highlight. Specifically, there's $15,000 that's given to the school district for the mental health, behavioral health work that occurs through the Hemingway project that comes specifically through for a private donor to the foundation. So we're very grateful for his willingness to fund the important work related to mental and behavioral health and supporting kids in our school district. Lastly, on page 9, just for a couple highlights, you have the territory transfer that I sent information to. This is unusual that there is a territory transfer that would actually appear on board agenda, but there are 5 specific parcels that we've been working with the Columbus City School District related to that are in technically right now the Columbus City School District. However, everyone in that specific subdivision attends the New Albany Plain Local School District because of how the boundary lines are drawn. There's 5 parcels that specifically have a portion of the school district in New Albany and a portion of the school district in Columbus City. So we've reached an agreement through the Columbus City School District to do territory transfer recommendation to the State Board of Education to put the 5 parcels into our school district so that everyone in that subdivision would be attending the New Albany Plain Local Schools. The Meta bus bid is on here that Mr. Darrow asked about, so it's just basically giving us the authority to notify Meta that we intend to purchase buses and to please bid them as part of the competition. So we get a competitive bid related to the price, related to those specific bus opportunities for the future within the school district. With that, if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm not hearing any other questions. Anybody like to have any additional information? Okay. I just also wanted to point out that in addition to these supplemental contracts, we also have some athletic volunteers, and that's always a good thing to see. So, okay, if there are no further questions or comments, could we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Kalinowski?
Yes.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Vice President McClellan?
Yes.
President Kohler?
Yes, that motion carries. Has anyone else signed up to speak with this scene? Okay. Then at this point, I would like to make a motion, and we'll be looking for a second, please, to enter into executive session within 5 minutes of concluding this meeting as permitted by section 121.22 G1 and 4 of the Ohio Revised Code for the consideration of the evaluation and compensation of a public employee. No action will be taken as a result of this meeting.
Second.
Thank you very much.
Is that a motion?
It was a motion
Laura,
and
you
a
motion,
second.
okay.
Mhm. And when you're ready, we'll do the roll.
President Kohler?
Yes.
Vice President McClellan?
Yes.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski?
Yes.